Hi, everybody, and welcome to the MMOA podcast brought to you by the Institute of Clinical Excellence. I'm Ellen Csepe. I'm a teaching assistant with the MMOA division, and this is Shelby Blankenship.
Hello. I'm
Shelby's
also a
also,
TA. I'm
yep,
cool like Ellen.
we are both cool TAs traveling the country. If you want to come see us live and hang out with the lead faculty and some of the TAs on the team, we'd love to see you. We've got some upcoming courses before we get started on our topic here with the older adult division. We've got October 7th through 8th in Falls Church, Virginia. So that's this upcoming weekend, October 14th through 15th in Fountain Valley, California. We've got October 21st through 22nd in Matawan, New Jersey. And then our Essential Foundations cohort starts next October 11th. So if you've never taken one of our courses, either live or online, we'd love to see you there. So today, Shelby and I are going to be discussing the new Netflix docu-series Live to 100 Secrets of the Blue Zones. We've had a few great discussions about this series because it's so pertinent to our discussion on older adults in general. Christina and I kind of started it off strong, talking about having community. Then last week, my friend and coworker Renee and I talked a little bit more about purposeful movement. And today, Shelby and I are going to be talking about purpose and the theme of purpose in this series and in the blue zones that were highlighted in the episodes. And I'm really stoked to do this episode with you, Shelby.
You're too gone.
I
I
feel
feel
like
like,
in general, purpose is just so kind of hard to qualify and quantify for
yeah,
not only our patients but for ourselves. And it's like, the meaning of life. Like, what is your
right,
life's purpose and how do we share that with our patients?
right.
So I'd love to kind of overview this theme for those who haven't seen the series yet, and kind of some of the themes in these blue zones. If you wanted to spearhead like what some points were in the show that stuck out to
Yeah.
you, I think that'd be great.
Yeah. So the two ones that I feel like they really focused on with the purpose was Okinawa and then the group in, I think it was Costa Rica. And they had like different words in their culture for what those were. And I'm going to try to pronounce them and it's going to be terrible. I think it's Ikajia or Ikajaya for,
Iki, yeah,
yeah,
Ikigai. I got
that
you
one,
covered,
that
girl.
one for Japanese. And then there's the Plan de Vida for the Costa Rican culture. And what I loved so much about it is that the purpose was ever evolving. Like it wasn't the exact same, like for every part of their life. So like maybe like while they're growing up, it's like this, and then as they get older, it kind of evolves. But the ultimate, like if you narrow down what that purpose was, it was always like the same. So like while it looked different in different stages of life, the ultimate purpose was the same. So like for the one guy who was like 100 years old and he was like a cowboy. So like he was like, I think like really like his big thing was like the work. Like he wanted to do something that benefited like his community. And so he just had like different stages of life of what that looked like. And I mean, honestly, like his 100-year-old like still cowboying probably still looks like what he was doing when he was 40. But the
Yeah,
timeline was just a little different. So maybe instead of doing it from 5, 6 a.m. in the morning to 6, 7 p.m. at night, like it's just either a little bit shorter or just the reasoning for why he's doing it is like even more important as he's gotten older. And I just thought that was like super neat how they really they kind of like picked their thing that was their thing, and then just kind of like it might be evolving throughout their life, but that like it was like their core center. It's like what they just identified as either in their culture or as a human, like hey, like my purpose in life is to like support my community. And so I'm going to do that, whether it's taking care of my kids and making sure that they're good, um, you know, uh, how do you describe that? Like a good, like they are a good representative of the community and they want to like have that. And then as I get older, like I want to make sure that the things in my home or the people around me feel supported. And then as I get older in that, like the animals and all these other things, like everything has like their little niche, which I thought was just so neat. Um,
Yeah. Like, I think it's really easy because, like, what are we looking at all day? Who are our examples for purpose? You know,
right.
we look all day at other people through the lens of social media. And I mean,
Yes.
I don't want this to be a rant about social media, especially because this podcast is likely going to be posted on YouTube and Instagram. But for I feel like one takeaway is that the life purpose for a lot of these centenarians highlighted in this series was quite humble. And it's
Mm-hmm.
beautiful
Yes.
to have a humble life. Like you don't have to, start your own company or change the face of your profession to
Yes.
feel like you've really had purpose
Yes.
in life. Like there is beautiful purpose in being a mom, and beautiful purpose in being a friend, and
Mm-hmm.
beautiful purpose in being a good gardener.
Mm-hmm.
And it is not just okay, like a settlement to have
Yes.
purpose there, but it's important to have confidence in your purpose in those domains as well. Um, I thought that that was really important that none of these centenarians who were there were a few of them. One I believe he was in his 80s or 90s who was a physician in
Yeah.
Singapore. He was highlighted
Yeah.
in the series, but that was another
Loved
component
it.
too. Yeah, like I think a theme is that these people, the centenarians and the people in these communities never really they didn't really retire. Like their life's
Mm-mm.
purpose could easily be their job.
Yeah.
And like I thought that was really inspiring that so many people continued their work. Maybe they slowed down a little bit or decreased their hours,
Mm-hmm.
but it didn't imply that your life's purpose couldn't be something that made you money.
Right.
um I think in American culture we have this like shift of like work to retirement,
Yeah.
and like you can't feel like you have to find a deeper purpose. It can't be your profession. And that was another theme that I was like, oh, okay, your purpose can be your profession, and that is totally okay.
Yeah. I had read a book like a couple months ago and it just like cemented some things like when I watched that series because in the book it talked about how it was a faith-based book. So it was talking about how like God gives everybody a purpose and it's not going to look the same. So just because like we might both be PTs, the purpose behind why we're both PTs might be totally different. And it was talking about how like if you really get to the center of like what you feel like your purpose is, it will guide you like through the rest of your life. And it's usually like one word. And she talked about how it would like for her, it was like edify, so like to build. And I just thought, and so like she was like a beauty queen, and then she did like this like news anchor kind of thing. Then she built a uh makeup empire and then built a clothing empire. Like everything was like this like building, like that was like her mindset. And she's like, I've been doing that since I was a kid and it became natural. And I think sometimes like for us, like it's so easy for purpose to feel like this really complicated thing where like I'm just trying to find, your like everyone always talks about that. Like I'm trying to find my purpose.
Right.
And I think if you like simplify, it's like, what do you like enjoy and what do you love doing? Like, what is something that doesn't require like just grit effort to like make yourself do? And now I'm not saying like, hey, like you don't want grit effort to like do the business or do the thing, but like what feels good? Like what are you naturally good at? Maybe it's just helping people or loving on people. And like that can just evolve throughout your life. And that just kind of gives you so much. It's easy. I think it's easy to, if you stick with it where it's just a job, when the job goes away, then your purpose gets lost. And I think
Yeah.
for these guys, they were so good about you, whether it was their job or whether it was with their family or community, like they would redirect the purpose, what it looked like on the outside, but the purpose ultimately stayed the same on the inside. Whether, like helping people by taking care of them through being a medical doctor, or just taking care of them because you have an elderly parent,
Right.
or, whatever. And I just thought that was so neat. And just, it was just kind of like solidifying, because I think it's really easy to feel like you have to have it all figured out, as you're in your 30s or 20s. And then
Right.
everyone realizes nobody has it figured. we're all making it up.
No.
And they were still learning. And I
Right.
think like that also like makes it so much more fun, because it's like you're still learning throughout your purpose. Like, hey, like always is fun. It never becomes this a job in the negative sense, like that chore where you're just like, I have to go, or I have to do this, or I have, it's like I get to do this. And that, I mean, it's such a reframe.
It totally is. And I think I get to do this, and that being a flexible concept too. Like, neither of us have children. And
Yeah.
I'm sure every person who has children recognizes that their purpose in life changed in some way
Yeah.
after they became a mother. And I love that about successful aging, is that purpose changing, and that
Hmm.
being not just good, but like part of life. Like, it
Hmm.
has to be flexible. These people were flexible throughout their lives and changed based on the demands that they had generationally. Like,
Yeah.
at one point they were a mother, now they're a grandmother, and those roles changed. I think that's truly beautiful. Um, and I guess that one word can change throughout your life. You don't have to find it now. It could be something that you find later. Um,
Yeah. It was cool. I love that stuff. I think it's so it gives you a little bit more grounding, because I think sometimes we feel like we're just like floating in the air and just like making it up as we go. And that, like, for them it was like a routine. Like they just got
right,
in that like a routine where it's like, you think about like I think of a ton of like older adults when they go to assisted living, and they're living by themselves, and then they get a kitten, or they get that puppy, and they're
mhm,
like, their day is dedicated to like helping, taking care of this animal. And I mean, like their quality of life tends to go up, because they are like, I am not just responsible for myself. Like, what I'm
right,
responsible for something else, whether that's another human, whether that's an animal, whether that's a project. Like,
right.
think about people, like my grandparents were super into bingo, like at their
Yeah,
church. Like that was they were the front runners. That was their thing. And like, whether they were sick or not, they were going. Like it's a motivator. Like it just keeps you motivated. And
right,
I think it's so easy to, like, when you don't have something to quote unquote live for, you're like, well, what am I doing? Why am I
right.
here?
Or something to get excited about. Like, it doesn't have to
Yeah.
be like a life's purpose. It can be something that's interesting in the moment. Like,
Yeah.
I'm for sure an obsessive person. Like, I'll go through obsessions where I just want to do all my friends' nails. Side
Uh-huh.
note, do you still have your nail polish on?
Yeah, it's a little sad now, but it's this is the last time I've gotten a manicure in like 10 years, and it's lasted this long, over a month and a half.
Well, I gotta say, when we see each other next, we're totally gonna do nails again. Totally unsolicited plug for the next time we teach together.
Right,
When
that's
we
right.
next teach together is going to be in Portland, Maine, December 10th, 11th, and 12th. I think it's 11th and 12th that will be there. So, mid break, mid episode plug. We'd love to see you there if you could come, and you can check out our nails. We'll even do your nails if you're like, I really want to do nails with Alan and Shelby. We got you covered. But I think, having, not just like a deep sense of purpose, but also flippant interests is important too. Like that, especially in Okinawa, people were always learning new things with their friends, whether or not
Yeah.
that was singing or dancing or how to play a new
Games. Yeah.
game. It's cool to stay curious and to stay passionate. Part of your purpose can be lifelong learning.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
And another, we can't, I don't think we can miss this topic. I don't think we can talk about the point of purpose without identifying the fact that a lot of these communities were faith-based communities.
Yeah.
Um, I think we'd be really, and I know, Shelby, you and I have talked about this. I'm
Yeah.
totally springing this on you, but you and I are both Christians. And so I know that our faith has been hugely important through different stages of our lives, and given us purpose. Um, and not just flippant, like, what do we do on a Sunday, but really purpose driving our life and our decisions. And so I feel, I don't know how to imply this to our patients, because, you don't want to disrespect the boundary of bringing up personal faith while you're treating somebody. But it really is an important point that was highlighted in these episodes, that faith was important to a lot of these different communities.
Yeah.
In Italy, a lot of the adults highlighted in that episode would go to church several times a
Yeah.
week.
Hmm.
And the Loma Linda community, that was highlighted in California, their longevity was based on a faith-based commitment to being a good steward of health. And that was not just their own personal purpose, but their purpose in life.
Right.
And so I feel like we'd really be missing the point, or we'd be missing a big opportunity to talk about how faith can be that purpose for
Yeah.
older adults.
Well, and I think especially depending on like what pocket of the world or part of the US you're in, like you will see larger either national like certain cultural things or faith-based things that are just so like festivals or being able to kneel, especially like in the Catholic Church is super
Right.
important. And having being aware of what those how important that is to be able to participate at that level is huge. I always know, like, I think especially like at Christmas, I can never remember what the song is called, but when it's like everybody stands up and you'll see people who are like canes, walkers, and they're just struggling to stand during this one song. And like it's almost like it makes you teary-eyed because like how important that is for them because it's like a pride, like in that
Yeah.
and how in their faith.
Right.
And when that gets taken away because of a physical limitation, that can be like they don't feel like they're expressing their faith to the capacity that they want to, which can limit that, which can be really um it's just hard for them. And especially when they for
Isolating.
the whole life been able to like
Right.
participate at that level.
Right. It can be so isolating. And I think maybe cueing in, like, for example, I have a few patients who their purpose has been their faith their entire life.
Yeah.
And so, because I know how important that is, it's kind of a good litmus test for their overall function and mobility. So, I've had patients where I've said, "How are you feeling?" "Good." "How's your church attendance been?" Because I know that that is a
That's a
key
great one.
litmus test of how how apt they are to access their environment based on how they've been feeling. And
Yeah.
that has been a really important thing for me to focus on as a goal. Like, okay, how is this person feeling? And then simultaneously, I've been able to judge, is this person able to access physical therapy? Do they, if why would they want to come to PT if they can't even leave the house to go to church? um,
Right.
and looking at kind of end of life treatment discussions,
Mhm.
when somebody says, "Listen, I don't even have the energy to go to church," I kind of read it, the writing on the wall, and say, "Listen, I don't, I could see that maybe therapy is too much for you to leave the house for." So
Yeah.
that's been an open conversation. Like, when somebody doesn't have the pizzazz for that level of purpose in their life, I start to really kind of reflect and say, okay, is now the time that we have to start putting the brakes on our treatment and just accepting that this is the end of my journey with you as a clinician.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I mean, I think that like we always want to like will people to get better, and so when we do, I think it makes it harder on us, especially in the older adult division, that we want so badly for people to go on, right? And sometimes that's not the conversation. Sometimes it's more, again, going back to that, like the purpose and like the quality of life, and making sure that while that purpose might be changing now, that the end of life kind of conversation um is more about comfort rather than physical capacity.
Right.
And that's a conversation that's not always like, hey, do you want how do you want to pivot? Like, it's kind of like you have to like feel that way, feel it out a little bit more, and ask like very pointed questions of just like, hey, like, what do you think the next like couple weeks of life, like what would be like ideal for you? Like, what would you want to do? And
Right.
it might be, and if it's might, and it might be nothing physical.
Right. It might be, gosh, I'm ready to die. You and I have
Yeah.
both worked when you and I have both been PTs for about 8 years, right?
I've
I
been about 6. Yeah, I've been a
Okay,
little shorter.
somewhere around there. And then you and I have both worked in settings where we've seen people
Yeah.
pass. And
Yes.
we've been a part of that really beautiful end of life and
Mhm.
that end of life journey. I think that, I think talking about this is going to be helpful for listeners of this podcast, just because I think it's really easy to focus on how to make life worth living. But to be
Right.
able to read the room and say, okay, your life's purpose might to be to go out in style and to die with
Go out on your
dignity.
own terms.
Go out on your own terms. That might be the purpose.
Yeah.
And being able to kind of read those cues as to whether or not somebody's purpose in life has changed, I think is really important, and something that we've yet to really dive into as a profession. Like, I've taken a lot of Con Ed, and very little Con Ed has talked about how to really help prepare somebody for that next stage.
Yeah. And I think that's where it can be super hard if the patient is ready to go and the family is not.
Totally.
And that can be, I know like with my grandmother, when she had lung cancer, she ended up going hospice like about a few months later. And one of the biggest things I think for her was she wanted to be able to go out on her own terms. And I think that is so much easier when somebody's in their like 80s and 90s, and people have watched them be like super independent, and then they've just had this like really quick decline where they're kind of just not able to do as much. But when people, like, sometimes it's that hard conversation where some people are like, I don't care if you're bedbound, like I want you alive. And then for
Right.
some, and for some people they're okay with that. And then for other
Right.
people they're like, hey, if I can't get myself out of the commode, like I don't want to be here, kind of thing.
Right.
Like the independence kind of can be there. And to me, it's an easy or a it's an easy conversation to say like, oh, when I'm in my 30s, I'm like, that's what I want. But I feel like the human heart has a lot of fight in it to hang on as
Right.
long as possible. But when you get to when you're, in those older age groups, when you've seen so many of your friends or your parents or whatever pass away, and I would say terms that you would not want to go out in, I think it's easier for you to be like, hey, like I just don't want that for myself, or I don't want that for my family. And then sometimes like the younger generations, we have a hard time. We're like, no, just fight a little bit more, a little
Right.
bit harder. And I I think it's like a respect for like, hey, it's their body, it's
Life.
their, they get to kind of decide how they go.
Right.
I mean, hopefully. Not all,
I
not everybody,
Oh
but
gosh, I am so grateful that we're having this discussion. I know, like, nobody says their purpose is in life to die.
Right.
Like nobody says like my purpose is to gradually lose my function. But
Right.
that book, we've talked about it a lot, Being Mortal by Atul Gawande. It just kind of talks about like how important it is to have this lifelong perspective that it doesn't last forever. And that's a
Mhm.
beautiful part of life, that this purpose changes and your role changes and eventually it comes to an end. And I
Mhm.
think that that beautiful long game perspective on purpose is what makes these perspectives of older adults so valuable. Like, yeah,
Mhm.
older adults might have limitations in regards to what they can teach us and things that are important to us. For example, Shelby and I both struggled mightily trying to figure out how to stream this
Yeah.
meeting on Instagram. And not many older adults, possibly, that's not
Okay.
the insight that we can glean from our older adults in general. But the perspective of what gives life purpose and meaning is just a treasure trove from
Yeah.
our older adults, our patients, our families. Um, and what breaks my heart is that our focus these days in social media doesn't highlight that at all. That there is wisdom to be gained from an 89-year-old, a 95-year-old. And I guess one thing that I loved so much about this Netflix series is that there was significant purpose taught to the audience through the example of these people who had lived their
Yeah.
lives with intent in mind,
Yeah.
whether or not that was serving their family, whether or not that was being a good friend, whether or not that was having the coolest garden or being a committed Christian. Those are the things that bring life purpose to these older adults. And I think we lose perspective on that when we look at young people showing us the latest weight loss trends on Instagram and TikTok. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and I loved that their like life journey was not passive. Everything was
No.
active. Like not necessarily physically, but like they always, like you said, were very intentional about what their day looked like. And so, I remember having this conversation with a friend the other day where he was like, I would rather like work until my 70s and work 5 hours a day rather than try to cram it all in until I'm like 55 and then I'm like, now what? You know, like
Yeah.
like have this like if you really, and I'm not saying you love being a PT and dealing with Medicare and all the things, but if you like really love, what your job is or certain aspects of what you do in your day to day. So, it's caring for people. Like I know so many people after they retire where they end up like volunteering or going on mission trips is their thing. And then that like become like they like transfer all that knowledge that they learned in their 30s and 40s and 50s and pivot it to a group of people who might not ever get that. And you just like you want to make sure that in your life you don't settle yourself short because I think it's so easy to be like, I'm just gonna make a bunch of money and then I'm gonna live on the beach for 20 years. You are going to be so bored. I hate that. I mean, I know that
Tell
because that,
them.
that sounds so nice, but
Tell them.
you're gonna get over it in like a couple weeks. Like unless you find something to give
Right.
you that, like I'm getting
Passion.
up in the morning to do
Yeah.
this. Like
Yeah. People drive straighter when they've got a load in the back. You know what I mean?
absolutely,
When you've
absolutely.
got purpose in life, that really helps keep you on track. And I guess with that in mind, I think, if I were listening to this, I'd be like, okay, well, I got to start hustling.
No.
Quick caveat: the people that are living this long know how to chill. They know
Mhm.
how to, at the end of the day, legit. These people, the 100-year-old rancher that we're talking about, they highlighted him dancing and having fun in a bar. They know how to relax with their families, decompress. They can turn it on in regards to their purpose, and they can turn it off and say, listen, today I'm gonna relax. Like
Yeah.
that was really highlighted, that they had downtime, they relaxed, they knew how to chill out. And maybe that's a lesson I could learn, to say, hey, I'm gonna have nothing on my to-do list today.
I tell you what, if there is anything that I learned when I got really sick, it's that right there. It's because when you are constantly just trying to get ahead, you're gonna bury yourself into the ground. Like there's gonna be a threshold that you just cannot sustain. And so if you, instead of trying to do like like run this sprint, like just do little chunks at a time. It is way better to take your time and enjoy the process than trying to just be like, well, I want to be a millionaire by the time I'm 35. Then what?
Yeah,
Like, like then what?
right,
You can be a trillionaire. Like I just don't. I There needs to be more than like a like it's great to have goals and objectives, but make it to the point where you can still enjoy life. Like it's
right,
like your purpose in life is not your job.
right,
You can have purpose in your job, but there needs to be more than just your job
right.
because your job does not go to the grave with you.
No,
It don't go anywhere else.
right.
And
Your
they can fire you
money,
in 2 seconds. Like it's just
right.
not, you need to have, it needs to be more, I hate, like almost like untangible. Like you can't like really like, you can't put your hands on it. Like it
Yeah,
needs to be
like,
something that's like like not necessarily like a feeling, but it's like in your gut, you just know, like, this is what I was put on this earth for.
right. And I don't know if that's money. Like, again,
Oh gosh,
this is
no.
life lessons from Shelby and Ellen at this point. And
It
we're,
ain't money. I
if
would rather be
you,
poor.
right, like that was another thing, like the purpose in a lot of these communities, spoiler alert, none of them were loaded. None of these
No.
communities were bent on procuring material stuff. A
I
lot
will
of
say
these
the
people,
Singapore guy was probably had some money though. Because he was in
yeah,
Singapore.
that Singapore doctor, he looked like he had it together.
Yeah.
But in fairness, Singapore is not a blue zone yet.
Yes.
They were
True.
a hopeful blue zone. They have the longest life expectancy of any country at this point, for a modern world, but they weren't technically a blue zone. So
Yeah,
just
that's true. That's true.
just saying. Um, no, but in reality, I mean, take from this series what you will, and your life purpose sure can be money, it sure can be changing the face of your profession, it sure can be, we encourage that. Like, find your passion, find your purpose, find what lights your fire. I mean, Shelby, I know changing our profession is my purpose. I know elevating what it means to be a physical therapist is my purpose. I'm not implying that that's bad in any way, but finding humility and purpose in small things is beautiful too. And if we can learn from these older adults and these beautiful lessons of lives well lived, I mean, this is coming on the tails of my grandmother passing within this year, just a few months ago. And gosh, her life and death were beautiful. And I would really be missing an opportunity if I didn't have a takeaway from her life story and say what it meant to be a good mom and a good grandma and a good Christian and a good friend and a good cook, and find real honor and peace in those things. So make up your own purpose, friends.
Yeah.
Do
Don't
what you
ask
want.
anybody else. You should figure it out. You need to figure it out yourself. That's for sure.
And
But I bet you it's already in you and you're probably stepping into it. If you're not, you'll feel miserable. Like you
right,
just feel you feel like you're walking and you're missing something. You're missing
right.
something.
And I feel so grateful. I turned 32 this week, and you texted me and wished me happy birthday. And life is beautiful, and it's beautiful when you've got to care, when you're carrying a load. When you have a job to do, these days have richness. Even if there's a
Mm.
struggle, even if you can't figure out how to live stream on YouTube and Instagram simultaneously, life has beauty and purpose. And I'm so grateful, Shelby. I'm so grateful that our journeys have crossed and that
Me too.
our professional lives and our personal lives have intertwined. And I just this series was really cool just because it brought up, what is the true richness in life. And I'm just really grateful for the season.
Me too. Absolutely, girl. Same, same, same. So glad you got a great birthday.
No, thanks. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. That was so much fun. And watch that series if you haven't yet. Find your purpose, and we'll finish up this series with Kay on Monday when she talks about nutrition and the foods that these centenarians eat. Thank you so much, guys.
Bye.
Bye.